Welcome to Empowering Plans, a show dedicated to identifying waste and undue expense in the health benefits industry, discovering ways to maximize benefits while minimizing costs, and empowering employers, administrators, and consultants to emphasize, once again, the benefit in benefit planning. Today's episode is brought to you by the Phia Group, empowering plans since 1999. Now here are your hosts, the Phia Group's own CEO, Adam Russo, and Senior Vice President and General Counsel, Ron Peck.
Hello, everybody. So exciting to be here today on this great podcast. With me, as always, is Ron Peck, our wonderful General Counsel and Senior VP. Say hello, Ron.
Hello, Ron.
And I'm Adam Russo. I'm the CEO of the Phia Group, and thanks again so much for dialing in. So just want everyone to know this is the last podcast that we're going to do on the Phia Group's self-funded plan incentives. The incentives, the carrots, and some sticks out there, but mostly carrots that we offer to our employees to get them to care about the overall cost of care. The next podcast that we do, we will actually bring our executive producer, Brady Bizzarro, on our show and do a live interview with him. I have never met anyone, even watching Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, I have not met a single person who is into politics more than Brady. I'm still not sure why he lives in Boston. I think he should be living down in D.C. But anyways, Brady will be our in-studio guest to talk about the Trump administration, everything about repeal and replace or repeal and repair. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron, who I know there's a lot of things that you want to talk about, so let's get this baby moving.
Absolutely. To date, we've talked a lot about carrots, sticks, incentives, but ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve two things. Steerage, because if we can show a provider that we are steering plan participants their way, they're more likely to work with us, and also to get employees to care about the cost of care, like you mentioned before, Adam. As far as steerage is concerned, the same thing that creates steerage also creates skin in the game on the part of the participant, that being incentives for positive behavior and punishments, the stick, for negative behavior. And today, I think we're going to focus really on some of the carrots and sticks that relate to everyday care. Yeah, we've talked about stories, somebody getting some sort of a surgery. It's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. We ship them to one provider instead of the other and save tons of money. But what about people who save 10, 20, 50 bucks for the plan every other day? Things like copays and deductibles for pharmaceutical drugs. People who get everyday care, things like MRIs or CAT scans. That's where we're going to focus today, the day-to-day heroes for the plan.
I mean, I saw one of our plan dependents actually come into our office today and meet with our HR. I just happened to see him walk by and said hello. And I know that he went into our HR department to talk about a big surgery that he's going to have. But we talked about those, what you can do, traveling overseas, using other facilities across the country. We want to focus on the basic stuff, like an urgent care facility. So let me give you an example. A couple weeks back, I thought I had strep throat, so I said, you know what? I better go to the doctor. My wife looks at me and says, oh, are you going to go to South Shore Hospital? I'm like, no, I'm going to go to an urgent care facility 5 miles away from my house. I was in and out of the urgent care facility. I had the test taken, which verified I had strep, and I had no copay. Now, in our Phia Group plan, it specifically says if you go to a place such as a Doctor's Express, there's a bunch of different names for these organizations, where it's a standalone urgent care facility, there is no copay. And what I can tell you is you're in and out of there in under an hour. The treatment is amazing. There's great doctors that work at these places. Most of the doctors that work at these urgent care facilities actually work at hospitals in their spare time. Or they do this in their spare time. Maybe they do this on a Saturday, but work at a facility, larger facility, during the week. But the point is, in the Phia Group plan, it specifically says there is no copay for the use of urgent care facilities in lieu of a hospital's emergency room or freestanding emergency department. Why do we do this? Because the overall cost of care to the plan is significantly less, but the overall cost to the employees is zero instead of a $250 fee if they happen to go to the emergency room for the exact same service.
That's a great example of the carrot and the stick. The carrot being that there's no copay if they go to an urgent care facility instead of the ER. The stick being that there is a fairly substantial copay, $250, if they go to an ER. Take note, If it is an actual emergency as diagnosed by the treating physician, that copay can be reduced or waived. Again, we're talking about plan discretion in those instances. I'm sure that's something that some people are probably thinking of. Another example of picking a hospital facility versus a freestanding facility. If you are a local in New England, for instance, you know about Shields MRI. They do a lot of advertising, the official MRI facility of the Patriots. There's a lot of advertised self-standing facilities. And you're wondering, hey, I need to get an MRI. Hey, I need to get a CAT scan. Also labs, lab work. That's huge. A lot of these hospitals, you'll be in for testing, and they send you right down the hall to a lab, and they end up charging the plan through the nose. Meanwhile, they're shipping the sample to the same lab that you could have gone directly, and it would have cost the plan half as much. So again, through the use of copays and deductibles, we incentivize participants to utilize these freestanding facilities instead of seeking this care through the hospital. And at the same time, there is the stick, the penalty, meaning a high copay or deductible if you utilize the hospital facility. Of course, that being if there's an option. If you're an inpatient at a hospital, clearly you're going to be using the hospital facilities.
Right, so we're not penalizing people who don't have options. We're telling people, if you have the ability to go to a freestanding clinic, there is no copay if you do so. But there's going to be a substantially larger one if you don't choose to do so. Now, it's interesting that you bring that up, Ron, because what's happening now is more and more employees around the country are getting smarter about this. More employers and self-funded employers are also putting this type of language in their plan. Not enough of them, but they are. What's happening now is more and more hospitals are actually creating these self-standing clinics, creating these urgent care facilities that look like standalones. But in reality, it's just a branch of the hospital. So if I go to an urgent care facility, I think it's a regular urgent care facility. It's going to be cheaper for my plan because it's a standalone. In actuality, the cost to the plan is the same as if I went to the emergency room. What they do is they basically have emergency room prices for standalone clinics. You wouldn't notice that by looking at the sign, but you'll see a small 8 font on the bottom of the sign that says a part of XYZ hospital system. And that's the only way you would know. So again, even when you have good intentions, more and more facilities across the country are doing this, and we keep hearing about it from brokers and our partners across the country, Ron.
Participant education, Adam, the only way we can combat it.
The next thing we got to talk about, Ron, are prescription drugs and all the supplies surrounding it. In the Phia Group's health plan, we waive all copays for all generic drugs. Why? We want there to be no reason at all for one of our employees or their dependents to choose a generic drug. That's it. It's as simple as that. So we say to people, there is no copay. So that's the carrot. But Ron, I know you wanted to spend a little time talking about the sticks and what some of the alternatives are. So I want to turn it over to you for that.
Sure, Adam. We sound like superheroes when we're waiving copays on these generic drugs. If at times there is no generic and branded is the only option, we have a fairly standard copay for that branded drug. But if a participant selects a branded drug and a generic was available, yes, indeed, there is a penalty and that copay goes up. So now we're creating that participant behavior through the use of both carrots and sticks. A $0 copay on generics, a $20, $30 copay on branded when there is no generic, $60 to $90 copay if a generic was available. If you don't think that that's going to move the needle, you're crazy. This has had an incredible effect for us, and it's also forced our plan participants to ask questions, to ask the physician, to ask the treating provider, is a generic available? Why are you prescribing this drug for me? What are my other options? The results have been momentous.
So what we're trying to tell you folks is these are the everyday claims. When someone needs stitches, when someone needs an x-ray, when someone needs a prescription drug, the everyday basic stuff where we're telling you your employees can save a lot of money in their pockets and the plan can save tens of thousands of dollars every year. The last thing we want to bring up as it relates to our incentive plan and our plan is our claim audit review program. Basically, anyone that finds any mistakes in their bills and that we don't have to pay receive 20% of the savings as cash in their pocket. That has made a huge difference. It's changed the behavior. It has created a culture of people in our office looking for errors, looking for double billing, triple billing, looking for inflation of charges to help keep the cost of care down.
We had a participant who was in a emergency room bed overnight. They were charged for the emergency room as well as a private room for the same night. But for their reviewing the EOB and pointing that out, we would not have enjoyed savings. They would not have enjoyed an incentive, and it really does align interests. As far as other things that we're looking to do, you say, hey, Phia Group, this sounds really interesting, really great, but it also sounds very complicated. How can we get on board? How can we implement the same type of ideas into our own plan? If you are interested in taking a plan document and customizing every single provision that's absolutely available to you, the Phia Group provides plan drafting services, others provide plan drafting services, it's out there. But if you want someone to take a plan document, point out the different provisions and areas where you can implement these best practices to create cost savings, what we've done is taken our own plan template, identified the areas where these cost savings can be implemented into the plan document, and identified what we think are the best practices when it comes to these provisions. And we're calling it the Phia Group flagship.
I want to take all the credit for that name, but I can't, Ron. I know, Ron, that you came up with that name. But at the end of the day, folks, this is the best of the best. If you want this built into your plan design, the flagship option is there for you. What I want to make sure everyone knows, too, that's listening, is that, we have to add this to our actual software. And I somehow volunteered to actually code it. And I'm very excited about that because I feel like a tech geek for the first time in my life. Like I'm actually creating code and building it into the software package. The reason why I did that, folks, is as I'm going through this document, anytime I see something where I say, you know what, we can do better than that, I'm bringing that up to our developers. I'm bringing that up to our management team because I want to make sure this plan document has everything in there that allows you to have the most available carrots for your employees as possible. So we hope you reach out to us in that regard. Folks, that's all the time we have for today. Obviously, like we mentioned before, Brady Bizzaro will be our special guest to talk about the Trump administration and what's going on with Obamacare. On behalf of Ron Peck and myself, thank you for tuning into our podcast, and we hope you continue to follow Phia and follow our belief in empowering plans. Thank you.